What was a fact taught to you in school that has been disproven in your lifetime? The US will be switching to the metric system soon. Eggs are good for you. Eggs are bad for you. Some eggs are good for you, but not too many. Eat all the eggs you can. Eggs are bad for you again. Eggs are good for you again. When I was a lad, I ate 4 dozen eggs every morning to help me get large. And now that I'm grown, I eat 5 dozen eggs. So I'm roughly the size of a barge. But how are you at expectorating? That it's impossible for girls to be colorblind. In 8th grade science, my teacher started showing our class those circles made of different colored dots. If your vision is normal, you see a number. If you're colorblind, you either don't see a number or you see a different number. When I started calling out different numbers than others in my class, he started trying to stump me. He couldn't believe I was colorblind. He was shuffling through all his cards with the circle dot numbers. He just about refused to believe it. This was in 1996. I've learned since that it's still incredibly rare for girls to have colorblindness, but we're out there. I am one of you. People still refuse to believe me when I tell them that I'm colorblind. Because, like you said, girls supposedly can't be colorblind. That, or they'll point to an orange cone and say, if you're colorblind, then what color is that? Grown adults doing and saying this shit. That cracking your knuckles will give you arthritis. Was very careful not to crack my knuckles because of this. Still got fucking arthritis, so didn't really win. You just reminded me that my knuckles need a satisfying crack. That things you do bad in school go on your permanent record. My 6th grade math teacher told us that God gave us butts for spanking. The 90s were a weird time. This was a public school, not a Catholic one. And she didn't spank us. She just talked about wanting to. And she was 65, and I did not find it at all arousing. I personally shit out of mine, but I guess everyone's different. That you will fail high school if you don't learn to write in cursive. Didn't learn cursive. Failed high school. Checkmate. Washington and that damn cherry tree. In high school, my teachers would preach that in college, a professor would never accept any assignment that was turned in a nanosecond after the due date. Experience has taught me that some professors are very understanding of their students' workloads and schedules, and will work with you and give extensions, accept late work, etc. On a similar note, all of my teachers said that in high school teachers would throw out any assignment that someone forgot to put their name on. The opposite happened. There would always be a big announcement to try to figure out whose it was. Hell, even my professors in college do that. College, write in cursive and I will end you. Current day college journey, handwriting, I'm not reading that shit. Go type it out. Edit exceptions, math and diagrams. Much of the geography I was taught in school ended up being wrong while I was still in school. Now a few borders moving or countries renaming themselves on the far side of the world would not matter so much. But I went to school in Germany in the 80s and 90s. My parents paid good money for a world atlas for my geography lessons that I was supposed to use for several years. The next year, the publisher came out with a revised atlas with a little German flag on it to indicate that this one now showed a united Germany, among other things. Did you make this yourself? I love things like this. How many Germanys are there? 1. But it's huge. This was funny AF for some reason. That insulin-producing cells in the pancreas are gone for good once they are destroyed by type 1 diabetes. New research shows that they do get reproduced by the pancreas, but the autoimmune response destroys them again straight away. There is ongoing research into how to turn this autoimmune response off, with some headway being made with a tuberculosis vaccine. Not something I learned in high school, but I learned it during that age. Essentially, I was taught that applying a tourniquet in a first aid situation guaranteed that the person would lose their limb, and that it should only ever be a last resort in an exceptional situation. Turns out it takes a really long time for someone to actually lose their limb when putting a tourniquet on, and a lot of people bled to death in the beginning of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan because people were hesitant to use tourniquets. Now, applying a tourniquet is one of the first steps when treating a casualty, at least in a military setting. Edit made the wording less convoluted. Also glad this is getting attention. Massive hemorrhage is nothing to fuck with. If someone is losing a limb due to a lack of blood flow under a tourniquet, doesn't that mean they would have otherwise already mostly bled out overall? I was taught the same thing in HS and a much more neutral position at the Red Cross, that brains do not generate new neurons after birth. I had a female teacher in grade 11 health teach us that guys can't pee with an erection. I told her she was wrong and she argued with me. I believe it comes from the knowledge that the passageway for semen and urine can't both be open at the same time. This stops you from being able to pee and cum at the same time. This of course doesn't mean you can't be erect while peeing, as I have video evidence to prove a friend wrong. Why the fuck would she argue with you about that? What would she know about it better than someone who actually has a penis? Also, for extra confirmation, I have peed with a boner many times. Am female. Still believed that you couldn't until I read this comment and all the ones in agreement. But if my husband asks me if I learned anything today, I'm going to say no. Go to the best college that you can get into regardless of the cost, because your career earnings will always be enough to cover it. Career? You mean the series of jobs you jump back and forth between every 2 years? P. No one was actually burned at the stake during the Salem witch trials. While in England, condemnation by the church actually did lead to some burnings. In the New England colonies, the more secular laws called for hanging on suspicion of witchcraft. They also crushed a guy. Giles Corey was one tough nut to crack. Not so fun fact, most of the witch trials in England were the fault of a single man, Matthew Hopkins, the self-appointed witch-finder general. A slightly fun fact, the last person accused of witchery in Denmark was a man. In 1936, witchery, because that was what it was called in the law. He successfully argued it was slander. I was taught in middle school that rivers take millions of years to change their flow path when in fact it's been shown to occur over decades. I believe the Yangtze changed its route overnight once. It flooded a huge area and then took a new path. Sorry, I meant the Yellow River. Flooding causes the mouth of the river to move up to 400 kilometers. A version of the food pyramid got an awful lot of brain time when I was in elementary school. You need to eat 4 pounds of corn a day. Wash it down with 1.5 litre of milk. What are we? Cattle? Well, I suppose it's useful for telling you what is easiest for the USA to produce for export. When I was in school, carbs went from the foundation of the pyramid to at least an important load-bearing block. Christopher Columbus proved the world was round. During the height of the AIDS scare in the mid to late 80s, one of my health teachers taught us that HIV could be spread by simply hugging or touching someone infected with it. Guess they should have watched Captain Planet. Sadly, that episode would not air until 1992. What a dark and terrible time before Captain Planet solved the AIDS crisis. Disclaimer, I grew up in a cult school. I was taught that the Native Americans offended God, but were offered one chance to come back to Him. This chance was presented to them in the form of the Trail of Tears. The hardship they experienced, I was taught, is of the type that brings people closer to God. And just in case you thought this lesson was done being racist, not by a long shot, since they rejected that chance. God permanently afflicted their race with alcoholism. I mean, this was disproven since. Well, it's just never been true. But it's taught at insane, fundamentalist, cult schools. Obviously, I know it's a load of racist horseshit, but it's absolutely something that was taught at the school I went to as a kid. Holy crap, did not expect this to blow up. I'll answer questions in this thread about the experience, but I don't think I'm going to probably do an AMA. I don't know. If people are interested enough, I suppose I may. What cult is this? That chewing gum will stay in your stomach for years if you'll swallow it. You made me swallow my gum. That's going to be in my digestive system for 7 years. You punched the highlights out of her hair. I don't know the meaning of the word. I was taught that in college you will spend all of your study time in a library reading and researching using books and reference catalogs. The internet was evil and full of lies and not a valid resource for academic research. You can see the Great Wall of China from the moon. Well, you can see the moon from the Great Wall of China. So that's something. Not only that, but it's the only human structure that's visible from space. To be clear for others, the Great Wall is far too skinny to be seen even from low Earth orbit. The fact that it's dirt-colored doesn't help, regardless of the source. Anything on the internet was considered to not be a valid reference. The Coriolis effect means toilets flush the opposite way in the southern hemisphere. Since this got a lot of traction, I'll clarify a bit. The Coriolis effect is real and can cause large things to spin differently in the northern vs. the southern hemisphere's large storms, for example. Toilets, however, are much too small. and are subject to a variety of other forces such as which way the water is pushed, the shape of the bowl, etc., for the Coriolis effect to make any negligible difference. As other people have mentioned, it is possible to observe the Coriolis effect under perfect conditions, just not in toilets. Had a substitute science teacher once say that bumblebee flight violates the laws of physics. I was in first grade in 1977. My teacher was an old lady, on the brink of retirement. Needless to say, she taught us her dated knowledge. The continents never moved. It's just a coincidence that both sides of the Atlantic Ocean look so similar. No one knows why the dinosaurs vanished. They certainly had nothing to do with birds. Christopher Columbus was a great guy who set sail from Spain on a hunch that he would find an unexplored continent. There are flavor sections to the tongue. Saying, "Stop it, I don't like it," stops people. Just ignore the bully. Nope. Stand up and fight. Even if you lose. I don't know when exactly it was disproven, but I was taught that Hebrew slaves built the pyramids. They were built, in fact, by unpaid interns who were using this great opportunity to gain real insight into what it's like in a working environment. There have been several papers in the past 15 years essentially proving they were built by middlemen architects and were compensated for their services in grain, beer, etc. Funny thing about that, the Bible doesn't actually say that the Israelites built the pyramids. It says that they built Pithom and Ramses, store cities for Pharaoh. People knew two basic things about Egypt: that they built pyramids and that the Israelites were slaves there, and connected them with no actual evidence. To be fair, there's not much evidence that the Israelites were ever slaves in Egypt in the first place, but that's another matter. Our brains cannot heal. I was in the final class for my psych major, Psychology Physiology 2, and the professor spent a fair amount of the first class apologizing to us, as we had gotten to the point that enough research had gathered to show that brains do indeed heal. He said he didn't, therefore, know how much of the information he would be giving us over the semester was going to hold up as accurate, nor what we had been taught over the previous 4 years. Psychology is really like 75 years behind other medical fields. Yo! All medical and physiological sciences are rapidly evolving. There's a reason that basically all medical professionals are lifelong learners and need to keep up with the literature and take courses and attend conferences and such continuously. Our knowledge of the human body is in many ways way behind other scientific fields, but to be fair, living organisms are incredibly chaotic and the mechanisms are super complicated. Psychology is really like 75 years behind other medical fields. Yo! Passes blunt to patient on the oblong couch. I remember being told in first grade that once you lose a brain cell, it's gone forever, and that sniffing permanent markers makes you lose brain cells. I think it may have been a ploy to get children to stop sniffing markers, but I definitely spent a lot of time worrying as a child about losing brain cells by accidentally smelling strong smells. The food pyramids weren't built by Jewish slaves either. Food pyramid, it was the brainchild of the sugarcorn industry. Surprise, surprise. Blood inside the body is blue. Did they actually teach that in school? Hilarious. Shit, I thought that was true until it hit oxygen. Oh dear. I'm 36. This hasn't been disproven really. It's just an oversimplification that was never corrected until I read about it on my own. In elementary school, I was taught that there were 3 states of matter. In high school, I was taught that there are 4 states: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. Then I read about Bruce Einstein condensates and realized that barely even scratched the surface, and there's over 20 that have been discovered. A lot of educated people aren't aware of this, I've found. Simply because unless you go into a science field, it probably won't affect you one bit. Still, I think it would be nice if it was at least mentioned in passing for the nerds like me who would care. We were taught that there were 3 basic types and most people don't need to worry about the really crazy ones. I also had some surprisingly good science teachers. There are 3 main states of matter, and probably another 17 or more after that. But if you ever encounter those other 17 without it being on purpose, you're going to have a really bad time. If you have a problem, get an adult. I am an adult and I'm fucking clueless. Your friends aren't always going to be there for the answers. I have the collective knowledge of the world in the palm of my hand. Still no friends. Though, you have 5 senses. Wait, we don't have 5 senses? People are either left-brained and creative or right-brained and pragmatic. No, in between. What pisses me off the most is that every infographic or poster looks like this. It makes it look like right-handed people are dull, boring, walking calculators, and only left-handed people get all the art, creativity, or fun. Wikipedia is not a trusted source and anyone can go on and edit it. Do you know how hard it is to edit a Wikipedia entry? The way I got around this is I just go to the bottom of any given Wikipedia article and use the sources they already provide in MLA format. Edit. I've noticed that a few people are getting educated about Wikipedia and how it's actually a really cool website and the things it offers. I just want you guys to know that you can actually download the entirety of Wikipedia minus pictures on a flash drive, only about 58 gigabytes uncompressed. Here's the link if you're interested. Wikipedia isn't a valid academic source, but a lot of teachers don't get the why part correct. It's not because it can be edited, but rather because it's not a primary source. Any other encyclopedia isn't valid as an academic source for the same reason. Anecdotally, I had a teacher that wouldn't allow Wikipedia, but would allow newspaper articles as a source, including one instance where I cited a newspaper article that itself cited Wikipedia as its sole source. That people would randomly approach me and give me free drugs. Edit. Most Karma 4 ever got lol, and get mad if you rejected said drugs. Yes, and they were called drug pushers. Hey kid, come over here, have some drugs. It's actually much harder to score than I ever thought it would be. To be fair, the only time I've done DMT is when I met a guy wearing fleece beavers and butthead PJ bottoms with a bouquet of flowers in his hair outside of a bar after closing. He told me no one should ever pay for DMT. Starting sentences with conjunctions was incorrect. Only found out the truth in my high school senior year when I got really into writing stories and looked up some tips. And lo and behold, it's grammatically fine to start a sentence with conjunctions. I write stories for fun, and from the research I did, what we are taught in school is supposed to be for formal letters and stuff, not for stories. You need to drink 8 glasses of water a day or else you'll become severely dehydrated. What happened is that someone measured the amount of water that someone consumes in one day, including the water found in fruit, other drinks, etc. He wasn't even saying that this is what we need. It's just the amount of water we get on average. Wasn't it that they didn't calculate the water inside the food you ate? Starting around 4th grade, I began writing everything with pen because I loved how smooth they wrote, and I would get chills like nails on a chalkboard, chills writing with pencil for some reason. Teachers told me if I wrote everything in pen in high school, the high school teachers would just throw away my work and fail me. Turns out almost everything in high school needed to be done in pen or typed. Astronomer here. When I was in elementary school, we learned there were no other planets beyond our solar system and they were super rare. We now know that thanks to Kepler and other missions that statistically all stars have planets. The reason for thinking they are rare, by the way, is there is a state of planetary evolution that theoretically couldn't be explained. Think going from clumpy chunks of material to boulder chunks kind of thing might be a different stage. Can't remember 100. It turns out we still can't explain how this stage works theoretically. We have just found planets everywhere instead. Beyond that, I remember the discovery of the Kuiper Belt in 1992. Past the planet Pluto, the beginning of the end of my very educated mother. Just served as 9 pizzas. So I guess now it could be. My very educated mother just served as nothing. Human blood is blue until it reacts with oxygen in the atmosphere. But sir, doesn't blood transport oxygen in our body? I remember being taught that it was impossible to pee with an erection. This was from a female sex ed teacher. I actually spoke up and said she was wrong. Other male classmates agreed. She said we didn't know what we were talking about and that we were wrong. In my mind, I was saying, look lady, which one of us here has the penis? This is a not so uncommon belief among some women. No idea where they get this idea. Thankfully, you can point them to videos when they have it wrong. Today, when I was in 3rd or 4th grade, we were taught cursive. The teacher insisted that all my high school teachers would automatically fail any papers that weren't in cursive and that everything done in the adult world isn't printed. By the time I got to high school, everything had to be typed, and the only requirement for cursive I've seen in the adult world is things that require my formal signature. Times New Roman is the new cursive. I can't even read or write in cursive anymore. D-A-R-E. To get kids interested in drugs. Yeah, basically everything those guys ever said was disproven propaganda. Oh man, I remember DAAI. I never smoked a single milligram of marijuana until shortly after attending that class. I spent the next 3 years of my life getting high as much as possible, then never smoked again. Could you explain what that acronym means, please? Women are born with all the eggs they will ever have for their lifetime. Well, a fake. It's not actually confirmed in vivo in humans under natural conditions. There's just experimental evidence that it can happen. It's been blown a little out of proportion by the lay media Nat Geo, science blogs, etc. The title of the article says stem cell study hints. This study does not disprove the theory that women don't grow extra eggs after birth. Wow, I heard that one fairly recently too. Whoa, shit, that was in my sex ed classes for years ago. Does I'm only teaching the theory of evolution because the law requires count? I got this spiel in 2005, and I don't doubt that that same science teacher is still pulling the same shit today. Historical humor tease liquid pricks on close, far-flung reply hard to find. This post was mass deleted and anonymized with redact, and in cases of alike in neighbor and way, and on weekends and holidays and all throughout May. And you'll always be wrong, no matter what you say. That was always a weird one. Science already disproved that rule. The reason so many women voted for the first time in 1960 was because Kennedy was good looking. Kennedy won because women couldn't control their lusty desires. This was in public high school. Edit, more women voted for Nixon. Look it up. Edit, okay. I'm done arguing with internet people. It's pretty clear that people are glued to that narrative. Sorry, straight women. Hopefully we have a couple of hunks for you to ogle in 2020. They still teach this. Source, was taught this last year. I don't remember the exact study, but it was statistically found that the taller candidate gets more votes. They say the same about Justin Trudeau in Canada. What dinosaurs looked like. Now we know they had feathers and used their tails for balance, but before they were like standing lizards. If you go into a gas station every single Monday at exactly 3 p.m. but a lottery ticket, and finally you win. The following Monday at 3 p.m., your odds of winning again decrease significantly. We were learning how odds work, and I ended up getting kicked out of class for telling my teacher that she was wrong. Freshman year of high school. That there is nothing in the center of galaxies, that the stars are just orbiting the center of mass of the whole thing. Oh shit, what is there at the center? Is it a Waffle House? You won't walk around with a calculator in your pocket. You won't like Pokemon a year from now. 15 years later, fuck you. Growing up, I went to a small private church school, and they basically taught us that not everything in science could be trusted, because science said the Earth was millions, billions of years old, but according to the Bible, it was only about 6,000 years old. And just other stupid shit they tried to tell us in regards to science. It was actually crazy. Growing up, I never really liked science so much because of how bad they made it seem, and then I got to high school and loved my science classes the most. It's so fascinating. And I just graduated with my biology degree this past spring, and now I just laugh at the things they tried to tell us as kids. Don't trust people who actually test what we believe. That no one knows where the moon came from. When I was in school, there were a lot of theory as to the origin of the Earth. Captured media formed at the same time as the Earth from the same dust cloud, split from the Earth while the Earth was still molten. Now we basically know that Earth and a Mars-sized meteor collided and the fragments formed the moon. Moon is goddess, wife of sun. It is known. If you be nice to people, people will be nice to you. This is my highest rated Reddit comment and it got gold. What the fuck LMAO. As a general rule, it's definitely true. If you act nice to people, the that will act nice back is substantially higher than if you don't. I work in retail, so encounter a huge amount of people each day, and as I make a point of being nice to them, the majority treat me well back. That whole thing about how blood is actually blue except when exposed to air. That tongue chart showing that different areas of your tongue taste different senses. Sweet, sour, etc. I remember being shown this chart in elementary school and trying to test it at home with no luck. I didn't know for sure. It wasn't true for years though. If you have sex, you'll get pregnant and die. If you have sex, you'll die. That part is true. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it, okay? Alright, now everyone take some rubbers. Brontosaurus were now Apatosaurus weight. No, it's Brontosaurus. Meiku Puremond. There are no stupid questions. I do agree there are stupid questions, but to me, It's the way it's asked. Anybody willing to learn anything is always something I encourage, regardless of the subject or common knowledge. But if you ask it in a matter of fact, well, it's a stupid question. There's a difference between, does everything have 3 states of matter? If everything has 3 states of matter, then why is water always wet? It'll wait. I vividly remember learning it took exactly 24 hours to digest food. I even remember Josh Emberden's response, so if I had a banana at 12:30 on Monday, I would poop out that banana at 12:30 on Tuesday, right? Somehow, I was the only second grader who found this funny. No, Josh, you'll poop out that banana a few hours later. Edit. Thanks everyone for describing your bowel movements. If you just work a job, you can buy a house when you're a grown-up. Sips whiskey, ha 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 ha. Ha ha. Sobbing. If you flip the negative sign on my student loans, we could both make a down payment on a house with it. I once had a sex ed guy tell us that you couldn't pee when you had an erection. Bro, I do this, like, every morning. That the Russians were coming to enslave us and that they wanted to outlaw Christmas. No, that's the Democrats. Good, they can outlaw Christmas. Then I won't have the expectation to buy presents for family members I don't like. Sticks and stones may break our bones, but words can have lingering psychological damage well into one's adulthood. Christopher Columbus discovered America. He did discover the continent to the powers at the time, though. Leif Erikson was the first European on the continent, but what he did was largely forgotten to time. He wasn't the first to discover the Americas, but he was the last. He popularized the information so much that everybody that tried sailing across the Atlantic after him knew there was a continent in the middle. In terms of college, as long as you do your work, they don't care about attendance. Except for by the time I was in class, over half of my classes had graded fucking attendance. How do I pay your overinflated salary, and then you tell me that my showing up is necessary? I'm here for the information, not your shit teaching skills. Edit for the salty few, this isn't a description of every class. It's a description of every problem class. A class that challenges you, engages you, and makes you feel as if you're actually learning information is what you're there for. That's what a successful class, to me, is. Some classes don't get to be like that, though. Some classes are just mindless regurgitation of information, much like any other standard class you've ever taken and thought, why am I here? There are people who do not need people to bark information at them for it to be processed, and they are normally punished more than they are not for that. I had plenty of classes that were eye-opening and wonderful learning experiences. Then I have plenty more that are just a blur of useless information that I had to remember for brief periods of time. And in the real world, any problem offered in that class is solvable with a Google search. I shouldn't fail those classes because I don't want to rot away in an uncomfortable chair. If I do my work and pass the tests, then I should not fail. I had classes that had attendance grades at 10-15 of the grade, and I loved those classes. I'm okay with getting Dr. Letter grade, that usually lands me with a B. Some teachers even didn't care about the 10-15 when all my tests were As. Those were good teachers in my eyes. I could go on and on. Point being, college was just another prime example to me of a clash between people who think the world is black and white and people who see life in full color. That high school prepares you for college, and that college prepares you for work. Depends on your high school. Double spacing after a period. I like that I was taught this because now smartphones put a period there. If I just hit space twice really fast. So I just turned it into double space at the end of the sentence to put a period there lazily. In sex ed, I was told I would eventually have sex. That high school was going to be the best years of my life, lol. In primary school, it was that you couldn't go lower than the number 0. Then in high school, it was that you couldn't square root a negative number. I don't know what you're talking about. I'd argue that with the latter, being taught as such when initially learning about square roots is practical. Although perhaps it would be better to be taught that they can be square-rooted. But it's a bit more complex pun not initially intended. That LSD gets stored in your spine and can cause you to randomly trip decades later. This one just boggles me because of how sensitive LSD is. Light destroys it, chlorinated water destroys it, heat, air. Makes no sense at all really. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Turns out he was a fraud who stole others' inventions and passed them off as his own. He never truly invented anything himself. At best, he tinkered with others' inventions, found a way to make them better. then advertised the hell out of it until no one remembered the original inventor's name. C. Light bulb. He even created his own invention company, hired a team of inventors, then slapped his name on anything they created. No one got credit for inventing anything except him. Edison wasn't an inventor or innovator. He was a businessman looking to make a quick buck. One bonus result of his actions, he tried to claim copyright on the technology to film movies so he could collect royalties on every film ever created. Filmmakers said hell no, packed up their industry, and moved to the far other side of the country. Back in those days, traveling to the other side of America took months, so it became impossible for Edison to enforce his copyright from such a great distance. And thanks to that, we now have Hollywood and a densely populated West Coast. I mostly agree. He was not a lone inventor, but hiring a team of innovators and grunt developers and buying sterling IP is modern business. I can't back looking to make a quick buck. It was a lifelong career. At best, he tinkered with others' inventions, found a way to make them better, then advertised the hell out of it until no one remembered the original inventor's name. T.L. Edison was the original Steve Jobs. It's exclusively called Creases Cross Applesauce now. I want my heritage back. I will call it Indian style till I assume room temperature. Nothing wrong ETH serving food. I'm a cook, and last night a server was complaining about making $123 and not $200. I made $89 after taxes and insurance deductions. Bats are not blind. In fact, they have excellent vision. They do poorly with light though. That's why they go batshit crazy when inside a house with lights on. I remember getting that question mark wrong on some homework in the early grades, sometime in the mid-80s. My mum and I actually looked up bat in my dad's Encyclopedia Britannica to answer the homework questions, and I was marked wrong for answering that bats have good eyesight. I suspect that the real lesson I learned that day was that if grades were important for an assignment, answer the way the teacher wants you to answer even if you know it's the wrong answer. That pretty much sums up my educational experience actually. The Pilgrims were the first to reach America after Columbus. Wasn't until 7th grade that we knew about Jamestown, the French and the Spanish Inquisitions. If you work hard and keep your nose clean, you'll be successful. Always interpreted that as an idiom. It applies generally, but for some people shit happens, and for others they get especially lucky. I don't know. I grew up poor and am now a fat and happy middle classer. My teacher marked my paper wrong cause I wrote maybe and she insisted it was maybe. That unprotected sex will always lead to pregnancy. Haven't gotten my boyfriend pregnant yet, but damned if I won't keep trying. That the lessons of World War II would never be forgotten. That apes were the only animal that uses tools. I went to a Southern Baptist private school in Lilburn. GA. I had to reteach myself science all over again and a real set of morals. Things off the top of my head I had to relearn or learn altogether. The Earth is not 10.0 years old. AIDS is not a plague on gays. Hugging a female is not a one-way ticket to hell. Dancing is not of the devil. Masturbating in the shower will not get my sister pregnant. I'm sure there are several more, but that's what I've got off the top of my head. Why do people care so much about guys masturbating in private? It's creepy that old white Christians think so much about what kids do when they're naked. Fucking sick. In my school, we had to watch that Super Size Me movie in 4th grade. My 5th grade teacher had us watch it, my 7th grade health teacher made us watch it. And then we had to watch it in FACs my freshman year, and then again in my senior year for foods we learn how to cook and stuff. Always factual. And my teacher's saying, this is why you don't eat here, blah blah blah. Turns out it's not factual. The dude went straight into a burger after being a vegan for a while. That's why he vomited, ate way more than he was supposed to, and walked less than he was supposed to. Nobody can replicate his results, and Spurlock is just a huge fraud with a personal vendetta against fast food restaurants and used fear-mongering to get people to stop going there. And McDonald's stopped supersizing because of that movie. Teachers are always more intelligent than students. My Algebra 2 teacher didn't know shit and just gave us problems from the book. SMH. We had a trainee teacher teach us maths for like 4 months, and I literally spent 45 minutes saying that he got a question wrong because if an engine has a higher MPG value than another, then it has a lower fuel consumption. The man was nearly 60 and never understood the concept of fuel consumption. Edit, consumption, not conception. That sound travels faster in a denser material. Not true, the formula is. So for the same stiffness, a higher density actually makes the sound travel slower. in case of nuclear attack. Hide under your desk. Obviously, it won't help if you're inside the instant death radius, but then nothing will. If you're further away, however, taking cover to avoid falling debris and exposure to the light of the explosion will definitely improve your odds of surviving. I think that may have been more to keep kids less scared before they get annihilated. If they think everything is okay and it's over in an instant, it's like a soft death for them. Hasn't that just been replaced with going into the hallway and crouching? Desks can block falling objects, but windows and glass can be blown in from the sides, and hallways tend to have fewer outer walls. You won't always have a calculator with you. Before the era of smartphones, the world was a frightening place where quadratics jumped out round every corner. I want my money back. George Washington and that whole thing with the cherry tree. Yeah, that didn't really happen. That the people I was friends with mattered. Had I known, I would never see any of them again. I would have made much better decisions. Pretty sure I was taught that Ben Franklin discovered electricity by flying a kite with a key attached to the end of it during a thunderstorm. Lightning struck the kite, leading to his discovery. I don't think that would have ended well. I'm 42 years old. I distinctly remember complaining about math, and my teacher said, "You think in 30 years everyone will be walking around with a calculator in their pocket?" Turns out most of us do. You won't always have a calculator or dictionary in your pocket. That you can't make a living playing video games. Did you hear about Pluto? That's fucked up, right? You know, that's right. My very educated mother just served as nothing. Edit, I don't know planets. I never understood why people cared about calling Pluto a planet. To go as far as to protest. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I heard about that. Morty, and I disagree. That's right. It's possible to disagree in science, Morty. Pluto was a planet. Some committee of fancy assholes disagree. I disagreed back. Gimme a ping pong ball. After you learn cursive, you will never write in print again. Pretty much everything about drugs. I had a social studies teacher in middle school who loved to correct us children on any little tidbit he could overhear. He gave us an assignment to write a story as though we were all Aztecs and living our day-to-day lives. I asked if it would be okay to write about being a human sacrifice and a priest doing the sacrifices, and he said, sacrifices in Aztec culture were incredibly rare, and any form of media that's tried to portray viewpoints of multiple people have always failed spectacularly. I ended up writing about gathering fruits or something, but when I told my dad, who has taken classes on Aztec culture in college, he told me that they made sacrifices at the drop of a hat. As long as they thought it'd help something, they'd go for it. And then Game of Thrones came out, and I was reminded of that teacher and his stupid charismatic lying grin he had on all the time. I was taught that violence was never the answer. I now know some people just need a good fist to the face. Just beckways you have an education doesn't mean you're employable. Right now, the millennial hate using this generation is feeling the pain of overeducated applying for remedial jobs. I think we were all spoon-fed that garbage that an education instantly guarantees you a good career. I had a psych teacher say a woman's period does not affect her mood. He tried to teach that. That was a myth. Now I'm pretty sure he was wrong. Pluto is a planet. Large dinosaurs have a brain in their tail. Your tongue has a flavor map. AIDS is 100 transmission. Every time. Pregnancy is 100 transmission every time. The Civil War was over, states' rights. I went to school in South Carolina for the last 3. In school, I was taught that the American system of checks and balances will keep idiots and wannabe despots out of power. Trust those with titles. Yep, I had a discussion with my daughter 9 a few years ago around this. I started with just because someone is an adult doesn't mean they 1 are the boss of you, and 2 know what they're doing. From there, I moved on to authority figures and the reality that they're just adults with a title. And to reference our earlier conversation, the American Civil War was fought strictly over states' rights and not slavery, and that most slaves had relatively pleasant lives and were treated as family members in many cases. That blood is blue in your veins and it turns red when the air touches it. I believed this all the way to senior year of high school. That Edison is the reason we're as advanced as we are. Constant praise to him while completely ignoring Nikola Tesla. I can tell you a fact that was not taught to me in school. I was a fine arts major. I took tons of art classes. We were taught to draw in 2 and 3-point perspective in grade school. I understood how I could repeat the process, but it never made sense to me. Our eyes take in a semi-sphere of visual information, And yet we were being taught to convey that information based on an arbitrary horizon line. In a college drawing class, when our final assignment was to make a drawing in three-point perspective, I decided to put an end to the mystery of why three-point perspective made no sense. So I went home and drew diagrams of perspective to explain why it didn't work and how natural perspective would appear without an arbitrary horizon. After a couple hours of diagramming my new form of perspective in a sketchpad, I remembered that Google was a thing and decided to read what other artists said about this type of perspective. As it turns out, the natural perspective without an arbitrary horizon is called curvilinear perspective. My entire final project was on curvilinear perspective, and how the rest of the class was drawing idealized nonsense. I got an A because the teacher was awesome. The universe's expansion will slow down, then stop, then the universe will start to collapse, ending in the big crunch. In fact, the rate of expansion is increasing. The fact of the matter is we do not understand dark energy enough to state whether or not it will continue accelerating or if it will in fact reverse course. The big crunch has not been disproven. The Neanderthals were dumb, savage beasts. Say what? They actually mated with our ancestors and we carry up to 3 of their DNA? Oh, pretty funny to see how they're not dumb anymore. Growing up in the 80s, I was taught all dinosaurs were reptiles and therefore cold-blooded. One of the prevailing theories of their extinction was a gradual cooling of the climate. Right around the early 90s, I started reading articles with more and more proof that many dinosaurs were warm-blooded and more closely related to birds. The dominant comet strike extinction theory took off around that time, too. Then came proof many more than previously thought had feathers or proto-feathers, including many velociraptors, probably. It's amazing how different our understanding of them has changed in my 40 years. One of my teachers told me the world would run out of oil by 2020. This was in the early 2000s. Now, I don't deny that oil is a finite resource, but I think we would know by now if it was all going to be gone in 3 years. This teacher was otherwise very good, one of my best teachers, and I learned so much from him, so this comment baffles me. For the record, he was also a Republican, though he did believe in climate change, so it wasn't a hip political statement either. When I was a kid, orange juice was good for you and eggs were bad for you. Now fruit juice is considered as bad as soda, and eggs are healthy protein. That Marilyn Manson had some ribs removed so that he could suck his own dick. That was a pretty progressive school you attended. That Wikipedia was an invalid source of information. Pretty sure that Wikipedia is the most valid source of information out there, with pages being under constant review modification and include multiple sources for reference. I think the real reason teachers didn't want us to use Wikipedia as a source was because it was too easy. Joke's on them. I'd just go to the wiki and pull one of their references to use as reference. So I went to public schools in Texas. I'm still trying to unlearn all the bullshit. In high school, woe betide the student who uses I on an assignment. You must never use I. You are not an authority on a subject and thus are not a valid source to be quoted. They will never let you get away with this in college. In college, why aren't you telling this from your point of view? You've experienced this yourself. Let's hear your perspective and how it relates to your conclusions. Diamond was taught to us as the hardest substance in the world. However, cubic boron nitride takes that title currently, being 58 harder than diamond though much rarer and less stable chemically. Alth's definition of hard begins to break down at that level. We have to look at it in unusual ways. You can't just see what scratches nanodienons the same way you can test a glass screen. That said, CBN is absolutely not harder than diamond at all. It fails in indentation and compressive tests. WBN is only stronger theoretically, as it's near impossible to get any testable amount of it, and shouldn't be included. Also, some synthetic diamonds kick the crap out of its theoretical 120150 Vickers with 200. Then of course nanodiamonds, which are a lattice of micron-sized diamonds. Testability is also an issue here, and it probably only beats diamonds by a little. So the winner is still diamond. Whole life insurance is the smart investment. A little off topic, but I realized that no one ever taught us how to study. Teachers just stood in the front of the class reading from the book, and not once was I ever taught how to take notes, prepare for class, and review what I learned. It's like trying to teach someone how to drive from the back seat and get mad when they don't do it right. You will use cursive all of the time when you get older.